I hadn't spoken to my parents in nearly a year, until my phone rang at 7:42 a.m. on a gray Wednesday morning. The shrill vibration cut through the quiet like a blade. I glanced at the screen from my bed, already knowing who it was before I saw the name. Mother. Not Mom, not Meredith, just Mother. That was how I'd saved her number years ago, a subconscious marker of distance I hadn't bothered to undo. I let the call ring out, the silence in my apartment swallowing it whole. It was still winter in Boston. March teased the idea of spring, but the skeletal trees outside my window were unconvinced. I wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders and stared up at the ceiling. A full minute passed before the voicemail alert pinged. I didn't play it right away. Instead, I got up and wandered into the kitchen, made coffee, and told myself I didn't care. But I did. I always did. The last time I had set foot in Glenmere was for Thanksgiving. The dinner table had been quiet, as always, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that screams through pointed glances and passive-aggressive comments, the kind where every fork scrape on porcelain feels like a gunshot. Gavin had gone on about legacy, like he was some trust fund philosopher. Camille had rolled her eyes at me in a way that somehow felt both superior and dismissive. When Meredith told me I was so strong for being single at 33, I nearly walked out. That night, I did walk out. I told myself it was the last time. That was nearly a year ago. I finally pressed play on the voicemail. Delilah, it's your mother. We need you home. It's important. Please don't make this difficult. No detail, no apology, just a summons. I didn't call back. I didn't delete it either. I stood in my living room, coffee cooling in my hand, staring at the city outside. My apartment was clean, minimalist, quiet, a small fortress of self-sufficiency. But it was also, undeniably, lonely. Later that morning, I called Ellie. They want you back? She asked flatly. I could practically hear her arching a brow. Apparently, Ellie let out a soft scoff. They don't do anything without an angle. You know that. I know. You swore you'd never go back. I did. And yet, I didn't have a satisfying answer. Just a dull ache in my chest and a mind swirling with unfinished business. I thought about the things I never got to say at Thanksgiving, about the years of bending backward for a family that only pulled tighter, and about how maybe closure was still possible if I faced it head on. That evening, I packed a small overnight bag. I told Ellie I'd be back in 2 days. She didn't believe me. I didn't believe me either. The drive to Glenmere was silent except for the soft hum of tires on damp asphalt. The road narrowed as the skyline of Boston faded into gray hills and half-thawed woods. By the time I turned onto the familiar cul-de-sac of Hawthorne Lane, the sun had begun to dip, casting long shadows across the pristine lawns. And there it was, the Hartley home, immaculate, proud, a little too perfect, like a stage set that never changed. But something had changed. Parked outside, tucked neatly beside the hydrangea bushes, was a sleek black BMW. I knew the license plate, knew the man who always arrived in silence, but never without consequence. Mr. Crane. My hands gripped the steering wheel. The last time I saw him, he had handed my parents a thick envelope, and me a brittle smile. I had a feeling he was back to deliver more than pleasantries. I stepped out into the cold. The air smelled like damp earth and old roses. The porch light was already on, warm and golden. A trap masquerading as a welcome. The door opened before I could knock. Meredith stood there, her smile too polished, too immediate. Delilah, she said, her voice like velvet over glass. You made it just in time. There's a family meeting. The words chilled me more than the March wind. I followed her inside, boots echoing softly on the tile. Everything looked the same, too much the same. The foyer still held the ornate grandfather clock. The smell of cedar and lemon oil filled the air like an old perfume, but something was off. My steps slowed as I passed the hallway. The family portrait that used to hang there, our last one together when I was 24, had been replaced. Same backdrop, same arrangement. Except now, there were only 4 figures. I wasn't in it. My heart beat harder in my chest. I didn't stop walking. Meredith led me to the reading room, her heels clicking with unearned ease. The door creaked open, and there they were. Gavin, lounging like a prince in... They didn't just cut me out of the will. They carved me out like I was never there. The sentence rang in my skull, silent but deafening. The door clicked shut behind me with surgical finality. I stood just inside the threshold, surrounded by velvet chairs, dusty blinds, and too many memories dressed in walnut wood and stale tradition. The air smelled like polished regret. No one rose to greet me. Mr. Crane barely looked up from his leather briefcase, but I caught the slightest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Unease. Gavin reclined like a man born into titles, his suit perfectly creased, his smile perfectly crooked. Camille glanced over her shoulder as if I were a minor inconvenience rather than their sister. She offered a flick of her wrist, like one might to a waiter who'd taken too long. "Take a seat," Meredith said behind me, her tone too cheerful for the graveyard we were about to walk through. "Let's keep this civil." I sat. Not because she asked, but because I needed to steady myself. The fireplace was unlit, the room cold, shadows bleeding from the corners, as if even the light didn't want to stay. Mr. Crane cleared his throat, stacking papers with meticulous precision. "As requested, I'll be reading the final provisions of Charles and Meredith Hartley's estate. Final. Like I was about to be buried." I scanned my father's face. He didn't meet my gaze. He never did when things got ugly. "Effective March 6th, 2024, Crane continued. "The Hartley estate, this home, the Glenmere property, the Lake Tahoe villa, and associated liquid assets, shall be transferred in full to Gavin Hartley and Camille Hartley." I blinked, just once. Gavin grinned, like he'd won a game I hadn't even known we were playing. Camille began filing her nails. Meredith exhaled like she had just delivered a kindness. I waited for the part where my name would come up. A trust fund, a note, anything. It didn't. My voice sliced through the room. "Excuse me?" Crane's lips tightened. He looked at Meredith. She offered a benevolent smile laced with venom. "Delilah, you've always been the successful one, darling. You don't need this. Gavin and Camille, well, they're still finding their footing." "Finding their footing?" I said slowly. "You mean the 4 internships Gavin quit because the culture wasn't right? Or Camille's influencer phase where she racked up $20,000 in designer debt?" "Let's not bring up old wounds," Meredith said, tone clipped. I leaned forward. "How about the medical bills I paid when Dad had his cardiac scare in 2018? The house taxes when you were late 3 years in a row? The entire Tahoe remodel you begged me to fund to keep it in the family?" Gavin scoffed. "No one asked you to do all that." Camille rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." I laughed. Cold, bitter. "Dramatic? You don't think it's a little dramatic to erase your own daughter from the legacy she built?" My father shifted finally, not to speak, just to reach for the glass of water in front of him. His hand trembled slightly. "I didn't do it for recognition," I said. "I did it because I thought family meant something." Mr. Crane's voice cut in, dry and official. "All provisions are legally filed and notarized. There is no contestation clause." "I don't care about legalese," I snapped. "I care about the truth." Meredith's eyes narrowed. "Delilah, don't make a scene. We're all adults." "No," I said, rising slowly. "You're parasites dressed as parents. You used me until I was empty. And now that I have nothing left to give, you've decided I don't exist?" The room went still. Mr. Crane paused mid-fold, then glanced at me. Just a moment. One flicker of something almost human. Regret? Sympathy? I couldn't be sure. "I built a life without your help. I kept this family from drowning while you posed for country club galas," I continued, voice low but sharp. "But don't worry, I've learned my lesson." Crane stood, collecting the final documents into his briefcase. The click of the clasp echoed like a gunshot. I looked at each of them, one by one, my father's downcast eyes, Camille's smug detachment, Gavin's wolfish smirk. Meredith, still trying to look like the noble matriarch. "You just made a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your lives." I didn't leave right away. Not because I wanted to stay, but because I felt something was off, and I needed answers. The meeting had ended. The room had emptied. But something clung to the air like static before a lightning strike. I stood alone in the hallway, fingers tracing the edge of a banister I hadn't touched in a decade. I should have walked out the front door, driven away, let them rot in their carefully curated world of velvet lies. Instead, I climbed the stairs. My old bedroom was still there. Third door on the right, next to the linen closet. I pushed it open and stepped inside, half expecting the past to crash down on me like an avalanche. It didn't. It just hovered. The space was frozen in time. A dusty shelf lined with participation trophies. A corkboard peppered with faded concert tickets and high school ribbons. The bed was made. The blinds half drawn. Sunlight slanted across the wooden floor like a spotlight in an empty theater. I sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the dresser. A memory tugged at me, barely formed, of Meredith writing something during one of Dad's hospital stays. A letter. I had stuffed it into a drawer, unread, too angry to deal with her saccharine sympathy. I opened the top drawer and rummaged through old notebooks and birthday cards until my fingers brushed against smooth parchment. I unfolded it carefully. Meredith's handwriting curved across the page, elegant and falsely warm. Thank you for saving us. You always carry us, even when we don't deserve it. My jaw clenched. I snapped a photo with my phone and hit speed dial. Ellie, I said the moment she picked up. Do you remember that letter Meredith sent during Dad's heart surgery? You mean the one you never opened because you said it smelled like manipulation? Yeah, I just read it. I sent her a picture of the line. There was a pause, then, that's emotional leverage. Classic. Keep it. I already did. You're not really staying there tonight, are you? Number. But I'm not leaving until I know what they're hiding. I dug deeper into the drawers, searching for anything. Receipts, printouts, old USB drives. Nothing stood out until I remembered my laptop. It was still tucked under the bed, wrapped in its frayed neoprene sleeve. The charger was in the drawer beside it. I plugged it in and waited. The screen flickered to life, the startup chime louder than I remembered. My fingers moved on instinct, logging in with the same password I used for everything at 25. Violet, 1989. On the desktop, nestled between outdated folders labeled Client Decks and Photos Summer, I saw it, Hartley Estate Rev 3b.pdf. But when I double-clicked, a prompt appeared, password required. I stared at the blinking cursor. L, I said slowly, I found a file. Legal-looking. PDF. Labeled with the estate name, Does it open? It's locked. What's the file name? I told her. Her tone shifted. Rev 3b, that sounds like a version history, not final. What's the last modified date? I checked. December 3rd, 2023. 3 months after your dad's surgery. I froze. That's after they told you everything was settled, right? They said nothing needed my signature, that everything was being taken care of. Text me a screenshot. I'll try a brute combo. As I sent the image, a knock sounded on the door. My heart leapt. I slammed the laptop shut and crossed the room. It was Mr. Crane. He looked, not anxious, but off balance. Apologies, he said, adjusting his glasses. I believe I may have misplaced a document. A pale gray envelope, monogrammed. Have you seen it? No, I said evenly. I haven't touched anything. He nodded, eyes scanning the room behind me. If it turns up, please notify me. It's delicate. Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, footsteps fading down the hallway. I closed the door, locked it, and opened the laptop again. The password prompt blinked. Try Meredith's birthday, Ellie said through the speaker. She's the type to think sentiment equals security. I typed it in. Nothing. What about Charles's? Still no, I sighed, thinking. They always use the same vacation password. Lake Tahoe, 2012. I tried it. Click. The document opened. Ellie let out a low whistle. Okay, scroll. What do we have? I scanned the opening pages, standard language, asset distribution. Then I hit the clause. Added December 3rd, 2023. In the event of medical emergency or health impairment, the signer authorizes a revision of inheritance to accommodate the perceived dependency of Gavin Hartley and Camille Hartley, superseding previous clauses. I read it twice, then again. This clause was added 3 months after Dad's surgery. I wasn't even notified. Ellie didn't miss a beat. Then they broke the law. Some people hide skeletons in their closets. My family hides them in the filing cabinets under the staircase. The rain had started just past noon, soft at first, then insistent, like the house itself was whispering warnings I was too far gone to heed. The storm clouds cast everything in a dim gray hue, and the whole Hartley estate seemed to sag under its own secrets. I waited until the upstairs creaked quiet, then made my way down the back stairs barefoot, silent. The main floor was still. No voices, no Gavin, no Meredith. Camille's laugh had echoed through the hallway earlier, too shrill, too performative. She was up to something. I just hadn't figured out what. The entrance to the storage basement was behind the dining room, masked by a paneled wall that clicked open with the press of a latch. I remembered the sound from childhood, the way it groaned like the house didn't want to give up its ghosts. I turned on the flashlight on my phone and descended. The smell hit me first. Dust, mold, old paper. My fingers skimmed along the cold stone wall as I reached the bottom. Shelves lined every inch. Metal cabinets rusted at the edges. Plastic bins sagged under the weight of decades. This was where forgotten records came to die. I tapped Ellie into a video call. "Where are you?" she asked, eyes narrowing at the flickering background. "Below sea level," I muttered. "Found the graveyard." "Be careful. These people aren't amateurs." I pulled open a drawer labeled 1999 to 2004. Inside, manila folders stuck together with time. I skimmed quickly, bank statements, property tax logs, repair receipts, all of it mundane. Until it wasn't. One folder stood out. Tucked between two thick tax files was a thin document stamped confidential. Private transfer authorization, dated August 15th, 2023. I flipped it open. Transfer of estate shares to Gavin Hartley, approved by Charles Hartley and Meredith Hartley in advance of potential incapacitation. My blood ran cold. "Ellie," I whispered, angling the camera, "this predates the surgery." She was already taking screenshots. "This is bad. They transferred the assets before he was legally incapacitated, but without notifying you, which violates transparency protocols under multi-era agreements." I turned the page. Stapled to the back was a printout of an email thread from Meredith Hartley to Andrew Crane. Subject, "Finalize quietly." "She won't notice. Just make sure the wording is airtight." "She won't notice?" I echoed aloud, voice shaking. Ellie exhaled slowly. "This breaches due process. You can challenge this. It's actionable." I stuffed the documents into my tote and turned to leave, but paused. A soft creak echoed down from the floor above. I froze. Then came a flash of movement, just a glimpse, through the slatted floorboards above the stairwell. Camille. She didn't call out, didn't make noise, just moved on. She knew I was down here. My pulse quickened. I rounded the next shelf when a figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the basement. Mr. Crane. I nearly dropped the phone. He looked oddly casual. No coat, sleeves rolled. But there was something calculated in the way he examined the room. "Delilah," he said, tone smooth. "You haven't seen a gray envelope down here, have you? Monogrammed. Quite important." "No," I replied, my voice steady. "Why would it be here?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You'd be surprised what gets lost in basements." His gaze drifted toward my tote, then back to my face. I kept my posture relaxed. My fingers, hidden in the bag's pocket, had already tapped record on the voice memo app. "I suppose it's none of my business," I added lightly, "what your clients choose to hide in a filing cabinet." Crane's smile widened just a fraction. "Be careful where you dig, Delilah. The past has sharp edges. Was that a warning or a threat?" He turned without another word and disappeared up the stairs. I stood still for 5 whole seconds, then shut the drawer, slung the tote over my shoulder, and climbed back into the main house. My fingers were shaking by the time I locked the door behind me. In my room, I sent Ellie the audio file, along with snapshots of every document. Then I texted her, "Backups in 3 places. I'm not playing anymore." They thought I was retreating. I was recalibrating. 2 days after I left Glenmere, I was back in Boston. And this time, I wasn't licking wounds. I was building a war room. Ellie's apartment had transformed. Her usual minimalist style had given way to a battlefield of sticky notes, case files, and timelines scrawled across whiteboards. Legal codes were bookmarked on one monitor. On another, the will's suspicious clause glared like an accusation. A printed photo of the Tahoe deed sat taped above her desk, next to a yellow post-it that read, "Fraud equals leverage." I stood in the center of it all, rereading the line from Meredith's old letter. "You always carry us, even when we don't deserve it." This time, I wasn't carrying anyone. "I'm ready," I told Ellie, who looked up from her laptop, eyes fierce behind her glasses. "Then let's make noise." I sat down and began typing. My fingers moved with surgical precision, fueled by rage and clarity. I was cut out of my family's will without warning. After spending over a decade supporting them financially, emotionally, and legally, what they didn't count on was that I kept receipts. I attached screenshots of the estate transfer forms, the email between Meredith and Mr. Crane, the handwritten note. No dramatics, just cold truth. I finished the post with a simple line, number "Truth is not betrayal," and hit publish. Within 30 minutes, the post had been shared over 200 times. By the next hour, it was past 1,000. Comments flooded in, some supportive, some predictably toxic. Families like this are why we don't talk about inheritance. "You should have kept this private. Blood is blood." "Stay strong, girl. You don't owe anyone silence." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The story was already out of their hands. At noon, I slipped out and walked to the cafe near MIT. The place smelled like roasted hazelnuts and rain-soaked pavement. I found Nathan at the corner table, laptop open, earbuds out. He looked up and gave me a soft smile. "You always pick war over peace," he said, sliding over a USB. "Peace wasn't on the menu." He tapped his screen. "That file you found in the Hartley system. Someone tried to scrub it. Took me 2 days, but I recovered the audio." I plugged in my earbuds. Meredith's voice crackled, then steadied. "We raised her to serve the family, not to inherit it. That was never her role." My hand tightened around the phone. Nathan watched me. "You okay?" "No," I said, "but I'm done being quiet." Ellie sent out the legal notice that evening. The letter was direct, ruthless, and indisputably grounded in fact. She included copies of every document, the audio clip, and a preliminary intent to challenge the will on grounds of fraudulent inducement and premeditated exclusion. "We just put the first crack in their fortress," she said. "Now we wait to see who panics first." I didn't have to wait long. At 10:42 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Gavin. "You're a disgrace. Hope you're ready to watch everything burn." I stared at the screen for a full minute, then typed back, "I'm counting on it." I set the phone down, took a breath, and poured myself a glass of wine. The storm was coming, but I had lit the first match. 10 minutes later, a new message appeared. "Mr. Crane, you've triggered a formal review. You'll be hearing from the estate board soon. They rewrote the will. I rewrote the ending." The building didn't look like a battlefield, just a quiet legal office on the corner of Main and Alder in Glenmere, tasteful brick, clean glass, and a row of clipped hedges out front. But inside, war was waiting. And I walked in ready. The receptionist greeted me with a practiced smile and pointed me to the second floor. I climbed the stairs alone, each step echoing in the silent hallway. At the end, a walnut door, already ajar. The room was exactly as Ellie had described. Long table, legal pads lined up like shields, voice recorder blinking red. A clock ticked above the bookshelf, marking time like a countdown. The air smelled like old paper and tension. Everyone was already seated. Gavin lounged back with false ease, flipping a pen through his fingers. Meredith was poised in her ivory blazer, lips pressed tight. Charles looked like he hadn't slept in days. Camille stared at the table, not meeting anyone's eyes. Mr. Crane stood near the end, a folder in his hands. I sat across from them, spine straight, face unreadable. "Let's begin," he said. The silence cracked. I pulled out my own folder and slid it across the table. Exhibits A through D. I suggest you follow along. Crane opened it, eyes scanning the documents. One by one, I spoke. The email dated August 15th, 2023. Subject line, "Finalize quietly." You'll see the line where my mother requests the asset transfer to be completed without my awareness. I clicked a button on the small speaker beside me. Meredith's voice filled the room. We raised her to serve the family, not to inherit it. Her face barely moved, but her fingers clenched. Next, I held up the old letter, handwritten, still creased. "You always carry us." "Emotional leverage," I said softly, "used to justify financial exploitation." Then I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward them. The banking transaction logs, showing that the transfer to Gavin's name was processed during Charles's hospitalization, without full disclosure to all legal heirs. Mr. Crane cleared his throat, voice low but firm. After reviewing the evidence submitted, I must acknowledge procedural deviation. The clause was added post-surgery and standard notification was not observed. This constitutes a breach. Meredith's face went pale. "I trusted you," she snapped at Crane. "No," I said, voice clear. "You controlled him, just like you tried to control me." Camille shifted for the first time, her gaze flicking up to mine. She didn't speak, but her silence was louder than Gavin's bravado. Crane looked to the back of the room where a second lawyer, court-appointed, stood with a file. Due to these findings, the current will is under interim suspension. The local probate court has issued a preliminary freeze on the estate, pending full investigation. Silence fell again. He handed out copies of the notice. Charles looked at me then, eyes hollow, as though seeing someone he couldn't recognize anymore. Maybe he was. I turned to Meredith. "You didn't just erase me. You exposed yourself." She opened her mouth, but no words came. I stood. No one stopped me. As I reached the door, I slipped the old Hartley signet ring from my finger, gold with the family crest, passed down through generations. I looked at it once more, then slid it into the inside pocket of my coat. I didn't win back a family. I claimed back my freedom. Beneath the polished table and guarded smiles, truths too long buried finally clawed their way to the surface. In a room designed to silence dissent, it was the voice of the wronged that rang loudest, and with proof that could not be denied. Justice is rarely graceful and never quick, but when it lands with weight. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, it may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Sometimes reclaiming dignity doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from refusing to disappear. And when lies are written in ink, truth writes itself in fire.